You've heard the number. I mean, it gets thrown around all the time, right? 99% of all startups fail. It's this terrifying statistic that makes starting a company sound like buying a lottery ticket. But what if that number and the whole story we tell ourselves about failure isn't quite right? Okay, let's actually dive into this. So, the figure you hear most often is that 9 out of 10 startups will fail. For decades, this has basically been the accepted wisdom. It paints this picture of a really brutal landscape where, only a tiny, tiny fraction of new ideas ever make it. But is it really an instant death sentence for 9 out of every 10 companies that get started? Or is the reality a little more, I don't know, a little more complicated? Turns out, when you look past the headlines and actually dig into the data, a very different picture starts to emerge. So let's just set that big, scary number aside for a second and look at what the numbers actually say about business survival. You're going to see it's less of a sudden cliff and way more of a gradual slope. Okay, so check this out. After 2 years in business, about 7 out of 10 companies are still up and running. So right away, that 90% myth, it's not even close, at least not at first. By year 5, it's more like a 50-50 shot. And then by the 10-year mark, yeah, only about 3 out of 10 are left. So failure is definitely common, but it's a process, not some sudden event that happens to everyone on day one. And this brings us to a much more important question. It's not just about how many startups fail, it's about why they fail. And it turns out the reasons are surprisingly consistent, and maybe even predictable. The data shows this really clear pattern. I mean, look at this. These aren't just random acts of bad luck. The number one reason by a huge margin is no market need. That's 42% of all failures. Then you've got running out of cash and having the wrong team. But let's really focus on that biggest slice of the pie. So here's the absolute biggest takeaway. Nearly half of all failed startups die for one simple reason. They spend all their time, all their money, and all their energy creating a product or a service that, well, people just don't actually need or want. It's the most basic mistake you can make, and it happens all the time. So what does no market need really mean? In simple terms, it's when a founder falls in love with their idea, with their solution, but they never really stop to check if a real problem exists for customers in the first place. It's like building a really fancy key, but there's no lock for it to open. A perfect example of this was that Juicero machine. You might remember it. It was this $400 Wi-Fi-enabled juicer that squeezed these prepackaged juice packs. The company raised over $100 million, but it failed spectacularly because it solved a problem that nobody had. People quickly figured out they could just squeeze the packs with their own hands for free. The company just assumed a pain point was there when it really wasn't. And those other two big reasons, running out of money and issues with the team, honestly, they're often just symptoms of that first bigger problem. I mean, if you're building something nobody wants, you're just going to burn through cash trying to convince people to buy it, and your team is probably going to fall apart under that kind of pressure. Okay, so we know why companies fail, but what about the people who lead them? There's this really popular image of who a successful founder is, right? Well, the data tells a completely different story. We all know the myth, the one we see in movies, the brilliant 20-something founder who drops out of college to change the world from their garage. But the data? The data shows the most successful entrepreneurs are usually experienced professionals, people who spent years working in an industry, saw a real problem up close, and then left to build a solution for it. And here it is. Here's the number that just flips the whole script. The average age of a founder of a really high-growth, successful startup isn't 20-something, it's 45. And this isn't a fluke. This is a super consistent finding across huge sets of data. And this just shows you the incredible power of experience. A 50-year-old founder is nearly twice as likely to build a lasting business as a 30-year-old. And why is that? Well, because decades of work gives you deep industry knowledge, a bigger network, and a gut feeling for what real-world problems actually look like. The exact things that help you avoid building a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. So when you put all these pieces together, the real failure rates, the common reasons, the truth about who founders are, this powerful pattern emerges. It shows us why failure isn't just random. It's a cycle. Startup failure is rarely a surprise. It's not some lightning strike of bad luck. It's a system of predictable hurdles. The same exact mistakes, solving imaginary problems, burning through cash, hiring the wrong people, they're repeated over and over in every single industry. You can actually see the whole cycle right here. It starts with a solution in search of a problem.
And because there's no real demand, the company struggles to make money. That leads to it burning through its funding. And once the money is gone, the business is forced to shut down. It's a chain reaction, one thing leading right to the next.
So this really changes how we should think about entrepreneurship. The goal isn't just to be the lucky 1 in 10 that somehow avoids failure. The goal is to understand the well-documented reasons for failure and then just deliberately steer clear of them. It's about playing the odds by learning from the mistakes that so many others have already made.
So when you look at it this way, startup failure might not be the mysterious, unavoidable tragedy we all think it is. It's a system of repeating patterns. And if they're patterns, they can be seen. And if they can be seen, they can be navigated. Which leaves us with one last thought. Is startup failure really an individual's mistake, or is it a system of predictable hurdles that we can all learn to overcome?